We've all heard about robbing Peter to pay Paul. We're going to tell you a story about how Obama robbed Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to fund Obamacare. This is a story, an exclusive from Jerome Corsi here at Infowars.com. And he lays it out, asks the question, will this be the final nail in the coffin for the so-called Affordable Care Act, commonly known as Obamacare? He said, federal court litigation provides evidence that the Obama administration illegally diverted taxpayer funds that had not been appropriated by Congress in an unconstitutional scheme to keep Obamacare from imploding. Now, this all goes back to a decision by a judge back in May of 2016, May of last year. In that court case, you had Congress saying you're not going to divert funds from one area of Obamacare to another area of Obamacare. And if you look at that court decision there, it says the court will grant a summary judgment to the House of Representatives and will also enjoin any further reimbursements under Section 1402 until a valid appropriation is in place. Now, Section 1402 was the way that Obama was going to fund in Obamacare those who needed a subsidy for the ACA. Not to be deterred, not to allow the law to get in the way, the grifter-in-chief came up with another solution. And this is what Jerome Corsi has shown here in his research. After he was turned down by Judge Collier, and after she decided that Health and Human Services Secretary Burwell had no constitutional authority to divert funds that Congress appropriated to this section of the ACA to fund Obamacare subsidy payments to insurers under another section, they went to Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. Forbidden by Judge Collier's decision from diverting money, Corsi writes, Congress appropriated for other ACA provisions. The Obama administration faced the prospect that the government could not pay subsidies to permit lower-income people to participate. In other words, it was dead in the water if Obama did not find another way to circumvent the court, to circumvent Congress. And so they did. And what did they do? They took what was supposed to be a 10% dividend from operating Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. They changed that into a 100% of the profits that they swept into Obamacare. Now, going back to 2008, when the government took over Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae because they had gone bankrupt, they decided at the time that in exchange for preferred stock, they were going to get a 10% dividend. Gradually, that would pay back the money that they had used to bail out these two organizations, and then that would turn over back to the taxpayers. But instead, what Obama did was they decided to change the terms of this agreement and to sweep all the profits of Fannie and Freddie into the general fund. It was those profits that they then used to divert to Obamacare to keep it alive a little while longer. So there you go. That's how the grifter-in-chief operates, and it underscores the fact that we cannot maintain Obamacare. It just can't be maintained. It must be repealed, and it should be replaced with market factors, as we saw outlined in Trump's campaign promises as he was running for president. We'll see what that exact plan is going to be within the next couple of weeks. Donald Trump is going to unveil it. And we're going to talk about what Trump is going to talk about tomorrow, as he has for the first time as he addresses the joint session of Congress. We're going to look at what he has proposed and made public today. But of course, we're going to also see that Trump is really between a rock and a hard place. A good example of that is an article that was on InfoWars today from Michael Snyder. And he looks at, this is really two different sections of this article. The first one is to look at how these bricks and mortar companies are closing rapidly. We got JCPenney and Family Christian Stores. And Family Christian Stores is one of the largest, actually the largest Christian themed merchandiser. They've been in business for 85 years. They got 3,000 people, 240 stores, 36 states. They have gone bankrupt. But JCPenney is headed down the same path. But our government is bankrupt. And this was something that David Stockman talked about in a recent interview. He was interviewed about what's coming up. He said, this is all going to hit the fan on March 17th. Now, he wrote a book called Trumped, and he predicted a Trump victory back in September of 2016 when few people outside of InfoWars really thought he could pull it off. We were pretty confident that he could. Actually, not 100% confident. I think he was even more confident than we were that Trump would win. We figured that they would rig the election in one way or the other. But he started talking about the stock rally that came in the aftermath of Trump's election. Of course, there was a lot of optimism that we had a president who is going to reduce taxes, reduce regulation, reduce the heavy hand of government that had been on Main Street. And now we have seen a massive Wall Street rally. He calls it the greatest sucker rally of all time. He said it's based on pure hopium. And it's not only analysis at all of what it'll take to push through a big tax cut. He said Donald Trump is in a trap. And here's the dangerous thing right now. The total debt today is $20 trillion. And it's 106% of the gross domestic product. And of course, David Stockman was head of the Office of Management and Budget under Ronald Reagan. He put that plan together, and he talked about how they had a lot more, way more wiggle room there. We have now 106% of the gross domestic product is now our cumulative debt. That's the accumulation of all the annual deficits. He said Trump is inheriting a built-in deficit of $10 trillion more. In other words, another 50% increase over the next decade under current policies that are built in. And what is that, essentially? Well, that is the welfare warfare state. So we have a situation here where we're going to have to get serious about cutting both of those to really have a dent on what's going on. We'll talk more about that. But he said what I think people are missing is the date. March 15th, 2017. That's the day that this debt ceiling holiday that Obama and Boehner put together right before the last election of October 2015. He said by summer, they will be out of cash, and then we will see the mother of all debt ceiling crises. Everything will grind to a halt. I think we'll have a government shutdown. There will not be Obamacare repeal and replace. That's the danger that we have right now, that we have been strapped by the establishment, Democrat and Republican, into this massive debt. And we also have, in the same time frame, the Federal Reserve is going to be raising interest rates. And we've already seen a spike in the number of mortgage defaults because a lot of people have their interest rates, their mortgages tied to interest rates that have already gone up 0.25% after being held down for a very long time by the Federal Reserve. Now, what is Trump planning to do tomorrow? Well, he's given us some indications already. He met with governors today, and he told them, you're going to get some authority back. And I think it's interesting because I've heard Mike Huckabee say, for example, that many times he and other governors have gone to the federal government, went to Obama and said, give us less in terms of federal grants. Give us less money, but give us more freedom about how we're going to spend it. Well, Trump said to the governors, you're going to get your authority back. You're going to get your freedom back. He's indicating that he's going to give them grants to do various things, whether that's going to be health care issues or whether it's going to be infrastructure. I hope that's the way that this would go with infrastructure rather than setting up sweetheart deals for crony capitalist foreign multinational corporations like we've seen done so much lately with toll roads being set up with foreign multinational corporations. President Trump told the nation's governors today at the White House that they will have more authority under his administration. He said, whatever we can, we will do to restore authority to the states when that is the appropriate thing to do. We're aiming to give you back a lot of the powers that have been taken away. Well, let's hope that that happens. Meanwhile, we have Nancy Pelosi pushing back against Donald Trump, saying that he hasn't introduced a single job creation bill. Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, it's not the president's job to introduce bills, and Nancy Pelosi should know that it's the Congress's job to introduce bills. But also that the Democrats, especially Pelosi, have been doing everything they can to delay Donald Trump. And then the other thing is that the government doesn't create jobs. The government gets out of the way. The types of things that Nancy Pelosi and others do, calling it job creation, is actually job destroying. The regulations, the taxes, the mandates that they put on people makes it more difficult for them to hire or to maintain their workforce. So Trump understands that that's what is necessary, is to get government out of the way. That's why there's been so much optimism, excessive optimism, as Greenspan would say, irrational exuberance. And that's why the stock market is so vulnerable. That's why we're so vulnerable in so many different ways. Federal Reserve can raise interest rates. Boehner and Obama put together a debt moratorium that's about to release. And then we also have the stock market, which could pop at any moment. All of that could affect real people, not just the Wall Street financiers. Now, what did Donald Trump say today? Well, he said he's going to increase defense spending. 10%, a 10% spike in defense spending, but he's going to match this with massive cuts to other agencies. The Washington Post said that the increases in defense-related spending by about $54 billion while cutting other federal agencies by the same amount. And they quote Trump as saying, we're going to make it easier for states to invest in infrastructure, just like I just said. We spent $6 trillion in the Middle East, and we have potholes all over our highways and our roads. It's almost as if we let the terrorists bomb us. But we let that happen to ourselves. It's years and years of neglect here at home. Infrastructure, he said, we're going to start spending on infrastructure big. And they point out in the Washington Post, Republicans in Congress expect the details to be released this week will be the first elements of a broader budget that will be rolled out next month. The Trump administration is expected to release a pared-down, skinny budget the week of March the 13th and a fuller list of budget requirements by the end of March or early April. So we're going to see a lot of details coming out in the next 2 to 4 weeks, not only about the budget, but about Obamacare. We may see something about tax cuts as well. How do we roll all that together? Well, Ron Paul says on military and spending, it's Trump versus Trump. And he quotes him and what he said about the $6 trillion that we spent abroad, how that has left us in worse shape than we ever were here in this country. And he said it would be better, and this is his speech at CPAC last week, he said it would have been better for U.S. presidents to have spent the last 15 years at the beach than to have pursued its Middle East war policy, stating that the U.S. infrastructure could have been rebuilt several times over with the money wasted on such militarism. And yet, he's going to increase defense spending here at home. And he asks, how many times do we have to be able to blow the world up over and over again? See, here's the big problem. With the welfare warfare state, it's really kind of, even on the immigration issue, it's kind of like a push-pull. With the warfare state, we push people into the United States because we bomb their countries, and then we say, well, we got to bring the refugees here. That's what the left, what the establishment is doing to us, left and right, saying we've got to bring the people here that we have made homeless, that we have destroyed in their country. So that's the pushing people into our country. The pull is the welfare state. With the welfare state, we offer them all kinds of benefits. As a magnet, we pull them into our country. So if you want to do something about immigration, perhaps we should stop pushing and pulling people into this country. Nevertheless, as they're talking about this, they're saying, Steve Mnuchin says he's not going to touch entitlement programs. He's not going to touch Social Security. He's not going to touch Medicare. So they're going to increase defense spending, but they're not going to touch entitlement spending. In a sense, as an introductory move, this does make sense to some degree. Because when we look at what has to eventually happen, yes, you do eventually have to get to those, but their first cuts, they're saying this is going to be revenue neutral, the $54 billion, the 10% that they're going to add to the Pentagon spending. They say they're going to take not out of entitlement spendings, but they're going to take it out of the administrative state. And this was something else that was said at CPAC last week. We had Stephen Bannon saying that they were going to try to get rid of the administrative state that has been the source of so much problems in America. And that is the massive entrenched bureaucracy that taxes us, that creates law for us without us ever having a say about this. We can never remove them. We didn't elect them. We had Congress abdicate its authority to them. And Bannon, I think wisely, is moving to cut them down at the same time they transfer money from their budgets to the defense budget. And of course, to some degree, that is a legitimate function of government. The welfare state, the EPA, and even the State Department really aren't those that necessary to our well-being, although they put themselves out there as such. New American points out that these entitlement programs will not be touched, and when Mnuchin talks about it, he talks about it right back to the Laffer curve. He says we're going to get more revenue as we cut taxes, as we cut regulation. Now that certainly is true. We know that is true from a common sense standpoint. The question is, will we get enough there to make up for that deficit? We did get more tax revenue when Ronald Reagan cut taxes and cut regulation, but we didn't get enough to make up for the increases in spending. That's the thing we always have to watch out for. Now, The Hill points out that Trump's budget won't touch these entitlements. They say that his aides have promised not only to not touch the entitlements, but to also pay down some of this $20 trillion national debt. And they say that for this to happen, they are expecting to see a 4% to 6% growth of gross domestic product. Now, we have seen only 1.6% growth under Obama. It's not going to be hard to beat the Obama administration's growth projections because they didn't do anything to try to grow the economy. And we've already seen Donald Trump, even before he became president, bringing jobs back. One of the places, though, that they're eventually going to have to go to is to Social Security. Will they cut the Social Security payments to people who have been promised this all their life, who have paid into Social Security all their working life? Or will they perhaps cut some of the billions of dollars that are going to foreign citizens who come here to live off of our system. You don't think that's happening? Look at this article from Breitbart. Social Security Administration paid $1 billion in benefits to those without a Social Security number. And they point out the Inspector General says illegal aliens can receive benefits through the representative payee system. That means that they can have minors come here, and then the adults that are attached to them can come here and get welfare payments. They say representative payees play a significant role in many beneficiaries' lives, said the Social Security Agency, because they're reluctant to give these people up. They say the absence of a Social Security number is not a criterion preventing an individual from serving as a payee. So you're going to cut people who have worked in America and paid taxes all their lives so that you can pay for foreign citizens to come here and collect welfare benefits that aren't related to retirement? That's what we have to look at. Stay with us. We'll be right back.